Welcome. So I'm so glad that all of you could join us today. My name is Gail DeGeorge. I'm the editor of Global Sisters Report, and I want to welcome you to our Witness and Grace program on how Catholic sisters are helping to save the earth, and you can too. And we have as our guests today, Sisters Sheila Kinsey and Melinda Roper, and my colleague, Barbara Fraser, who is editor of Earthbeat. So before we begin, I wanted to make just a few housekeeping announcements. You may have noticed that you're muted today. We put everyone on mute to help mitigate any background distractions, and so please keep the mute on. The chat will go directly to one of our NCR colleagues. If you have any technical issues, please go ahead and send a message there. We'll get someone to try to help you. And if you have a question, you can try to put it in the chat. Well, we have a pretty full program, but we'll try to get to questions as we can. So within a few days of this session, I also wanted to let you know that you'll get an email from us, which will have resources referenced today by our presenters, and it'll have a link to a playback so you can share it with others if you want, or replay it yourself to listen to. So don't worry if you miss something, we'll get it in that follow-up email. So, and you'll have it in plenty of time for Earth Day. So that'll be a good thing to do. So now I want to tell you a little bit about the guests we have. We're so excited to have today. And Sister Sheila Kinsey is a member of the Wheaton community of the Franciscan Sisters, Daughters of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary. She has served as the executive co-secretary for the Justice, Peace, and Integrity of Creation Commission of the Union of Superior Generals and the International Union of Superior Generals since 2015. She's coordinator of the UISG campaign, Sowing Hope for the Planet, which we'll talk about more today, which promotes the integration of Laudato Si by religious congregations. She serves on the steering committees of the Global Catholic Climate Movement and the Catholic Nonviolence Initiative. She's also a member of the Vatican's Dicastery for Promoting Integral Human Development and the COVID-19 Commission's Integral Ecology Task Force. She serves on the steering committee for the Laudato Si rollout plan, which we'll also be talking about. And she helped organize the participation of JPIC promoters during the Synod for the Amazon in October 2019. She's worked extensively on mining issues since 2013, and she's been actively involved in issues related to poverty, human rights, refugees, migrants, anti-trafficking, peace building, environment, nonviolence, and sexual abuse. So welcome, Sister Sheila. Sister Melinda Roper was born and raised in the Great Lakes region of North America and became a Maryknoll sister in 1957. After serving 14 years in Mexico and Central America, she served as president of the congregation from 1978 to 1984. In 1985, she began living in the tropical rainforest of Darién, Panama. Along with other Maryknoll sisters, she formed a team with the Claretian priests and laity in this area. They're all learning to live in the agricultural frontier in one of the most biodiverse areas of the Americas. And that influenced how and what they do and taught and celebrate faith. So those years of experience led to the formation of eco-spiritual retreats, the Web of Life, for the people of Darién, as well as for international participants. And in 2017, we sent a Global Sisters Report writer to go on that Web of Life, and that package is already up online, and you can participate on it and reread those articles that were wonderfully done. So from the experience of the pandemic, she, along with the entire community of life in Darién, anticipate the emergence of a new web of living and a new web of life. So now I'm going to turn to my colleague, Barbara Fraser, who is the editor of Earthbeat, and ask her to introduce herself, tell a little bit about Earthbeat, and then turn to Sister Sheila for an opening prayer and get us started. So Barbara, on to you.
Thank you, Gail. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining us. I'm delighted to be here with you, Gail, and with Sister Sheila and Sister Melinda. I'm joining you from Lima, Peru, where I've lived for 30 years, working first as a lay missionary with Maryknoll and then as a freelance journalist. Since last August, I've been editor of Earthbeat, which is NCR's digital publication covering the climate crisis from a perspective of faith and environmental justice. I work there with Brian Rowe, who's been NCR's environment correspondent and has written on environmental issues for NCR for about a decade. And I'd like to invite you all to sign up for Earthbeat Weekly. We'll have a link in the materials that we send you after this program. Earthbeat Weekly is our Friday newsletter, which will help you keep up with news of climate and faith. So thanks again. I'm delighted to be here. And Sister Sheila, I'd like to invite you to bring us together, call us together in prayer.
Thank you. O powerful God, who shows yourself in mercy and loving compassion, you are present in the whole universe, prompting us to wonder at the grandeur of your glorious plan. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists, calling us to participate and extend our gentle and nurturing presence. Fill us with peace that we may live in nonviolence, harmony, and well-being as brothers and sisters, harming no one in our common home. O God of the poor, we meet you in those who are suffering deprivation of basic human needs: food, water, health, access to COVID vaccines, work, and the destruction of our planet. Help us to rescue the abandoned in welcoming, protecting, promoting, and integrating them into a receptive community. They are so precious in your eyes that we ask to see with your loving gaze. Bring healing to our lives so that we can bring that life-giving presence to others, that we may protect the world and not prey on it by respecting the human rights and the rights of nature, that we may sow beauty as sowers of hope for the planet. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, because everything reflects something of your being. To be filled with awe and contemplation, so that we can be one in the deep presence of who you are. To recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature, because everything is interconnected. Thank you for being with us each day, guiding and protecting, encouraging and loving us on this journey. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle to not lose hope and to know that you are with us for justice, love, and peace as we strive to be your grace-filled presence wherever we are. Amen.
Thank you, Sister Sheila. And you mentioned that we're all called to be sowers of hope for the planet. And indeed, you have a project called Sowing Hope for the Planet. It's a project that started in June of 2018. And it challenges sisters and their congregations to find ways to implement the message of Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home, and to share those projects on the Sowing Hope for the Planet website. Could you share with us some of the most interesting examples of Catholic women religious caring for creation, reducing their carbon footprint, or other steps they're taking to alleviate climate change and to address environmental concerns? How are some of those those efforts that they're doing being replicated?
Well, I think when we think about how we can bring about change is through education and inspiration. So the examples that are shared either on our website or if they put them through the resource sharing center, these are all examples that can be replicated. So I'd like to talk about the one on the carbon footprint. So many of the congregations are thinking about how can I reduce my carbon footprint, and then how can I share the resources, the finances that I'm saving by taking alternate ways of transportation. And a good example is Holy Cross Sisters. And they even began to look at the environment and their concern back in 2009. And as an international congregation, they're very aware of what's happening in Ghana and India and Mexico, and realizing the struggles of their sisters in those areas with the people that they are working with. And so they decided, well, when we cut back on the money that we're spending for this transportation, let's put it in for good use. So they thought about a project in Ghana, and the project ended up being something with plastics. And it was a condition in which even if there was a little bit of rain, it would cause a flooding. things would be stopped up. And so in conversation with the sisters, they realized they could do some recycling with the plastics. And so they began a venture of collecting the plastics, sorting it through, and then taking it to a recycling place. And what happened is that became a business, and they even were able to share that with other dioceses. That was an exciting piece because it was something that they could use and that it really benefited the whole community. Now, another example, we're going to go to Japan and Korea, where they have this event called the mud ball throw. And what this is that they really get together and they have chemicals that are helping to purify the ocean or the water, and it also helps the fish. And so they make about 2,000 of them, and they get on the banks of the river there, and they throw in these mud balls, and all the while they are purifying the water and making the fish having a healthier environment. And as they're doing it, they begin to gather people from the community that's going by, baseball players. They begin to have the elderly there. So it becomes a community event, and see who can throw that ball farthest, and all the while they're doing something good. I mean, go to Cameroon, and we got the young people on the radio station, and they're doing skits and they're doing songs, and they're educating the community about what they can do about the environment and how they can help each other grow and care for one another. So important. And another time we visited Lebanon, and they had plots by their school where they were planting trees. And then they showed where they had visited on the hillside and how degraded that was. It was really destroyed in many, many ways. And they showed the after effect, where the trees that they had been working on, their little saplings, they had planted them. And then they had a drama afterwards, and they were singing songs and dancing and telling the families, this is something that we've done, and we want you to celebrate this work with us. So it was really a joyous event. And when we had that on one of the webinars, it was like we always hear so many sad stories about Lebanon. And then when you begin to see what is being done there and the delight out of which they are sharing it with one another, it was so heartwarming to be able to see that and to feel that energy, coming through. So I like to share those examples, and I think they could be repeated. And the recipe for these mud balls, we can find them. They're there. They're videoed. They have videos of this already on YouTube. So thank you.
Great. Those are wonderful examples.
One quick question there. When other communities would like to replicate experiences like that, do you have any advice for them for the kinds of steps they can take? Because what works in one place won't necessarily work in another. What kinds of things should they consider?
Well, one of the things is that we have the video, so they can kind of watch that. And it was really interesting because I did just exactly what you're saying, Barbara. Now, how can we make these mud balls? And you know what? You can put in mud balls and you can find out exactly how to do that. So if you're excited, and they also are in different countries, so they can try to do that. The carbon footprint is, there are different like apps for that. And so what the Holy Cross sisters decided to do is just do their own plan, and then decided, okay, let's do some alternative energies. Let's do some educational pieces. Let's do some things that will benefit our sisters and the ministries that they are. So they made up their own plans. So it's really possible to make a difference and to spread the good news.
Great. Well, that's wonderful. I was waiting for one of our colleagues will show the Sowing Hope for the Planet website shortly. But I also want to take a minute now, then, Sister Melinda, to share with us about your initiative in Darién, Panama, with on-the-ground efforts to create more environmentally sensitive, sustainable agriculture and ecological practices. So can you explain to us what you're doing there?
Well, I'd like to be just a little bit autobiographical, because one of the things that was so important for me when I first arrived, and for the next 10 or 11 years, excuse me, was discovering where I was. And for me, I had come from years of experience in Central America during the time of civil war and a lot of violence, conflict, and how that influenced our presence and what we thought or how we could accompany the people. And then when I chose Darién and we began to live here, it sounds so funny to me right now, but I think it took me about 6 or 7 years to discover where I was. Because I was not in Central America, I was in a tropical rainforest. And the environment where we live, the earth with which we identify, begins to take on such importance from a very deep place within us. And I believe that the whole process of discovering where we are, and we ask that question in many ways, well, where are you? And some people will answer from a psychological moment in their life, or a geographical moment, or a spiritual moment, but this is just a very simple question. Geographically, to discover where I was. And some of the things that I began to discover about where I was, but also about myself and about others, was that being in a rainforest is, one becomes aware of the great diversity, beauty, but also the fragility of life. Life in the rainforest has a very quick turnover, if you put it in more faith terms, and the death resurrection experience is daily in the forest. But it's not just of the human community, it's of the entire community that is constantly being transformed. And the area that I arrived at in Darién was one of an agricultural frontier. And that means that the government had opened up this area for Panamanians from the interior of the country, where most of the farming was done. The land was exhausted and they were looking for new land and more land. And so the government opened up the forest for the people to come and stake their claims and then begin to work the land. So it was basically, the people were arriving at the same time, more or less, when we arrived. And the experience of accompanying people who were so poor, that had never heard of Oscar Romero or the conflicts in Central America. It was a big challenge, pastoral challenge, to discover, well, not only where am I, but what am I doing here? And so the whole pastoral focus and spiritual focus of our lives changed in order to try to respond to what it means to struggle, to produce your own food, to be able to educate your family, take care of your family. And sadly enough, that was combined with lots of contradictions, because the traditional way of producing food for the small farmer is the slash and burn, which meant the destruction of the forest, it meant the burning of the land, and then with time it meant the using of chemicals. So while there were so many positive things and so many admirable qualities in the people who came in searching for their life, searching for the future, they also came, as we all do, with lots of things that are counterproductive. And the big pastoral challenge to accompany poor farmers who are not in, and in Panama this was true at that time, not in an extremely conflictive political situation as in Central America. So the pastoral challenge was great, and I would say it has even become greater now that most of the forest has been destroyed. So it's the wonderful experience of these years has been a whole personal transformation, hopefully also with the people who live in this part of Darién, as we try to look at the future, which is very different from 30 years ago, because the forest is gone.
So how are you raising that eco-awareness? I'm going to follow up on that. What was your role in trying to make them more aware of sustainable agricultural practices?
Wonderful question. Thank you. Because the challenge to say, how are we looking for life together in terms of, not only in terms of survival, but in terms of the quality of life and the quality of life that is offered us basically by the gospel, by the living community, by living our faith. And one of the things that we discovered as we were moving along, because almost all the people were migrants from the interior of Panama, was to establish to help the people identify themselves as Dariénitas, people from Darién. And to this day, it's very difficult, because until we begin to identify with the very land, physically, the land, the forest, the air, the water, where we live, we're living a fragmented, a dualistic type existence. And many of the people, if it was time to have a child in the family, they would save their money so that the mother could go back to their original province, have the child, and then come back to Darién, so that their political identity would be the number of their identification card would be from their province of origin. And what that led to was not being wholly identified with the land and not being able to say, I am from Darién, soy Dariénita, instead of soy Santeño from another part of the country. Soy, this is who I am. I'm of this land, I'm of this air, I'm of this water, I'm of this forest. The land becomes a commodity. It becomes something to be used for my own benefit, our own benefit. And when that time is over, then I can sell it. It's another thing. It just works into the whole economic system in most of the world, where everything has a price and everything can be sold. And so that type of situation, I would say my experiences has very much to do with how we identify ourselves. We identify ourselves with the land, as I had described, with the geographical place where we are, with all its qualities, with all its challenges. Then that, I think, is a turning point of conversion. And especially, as I said, I come from the Great Lakes area, not from, I didn't grow up in a city, but I think that the whole urban challenge to ecology for me, and we can put this in the pot, would be that we have to be able to get our hands and feet dirty in the land, in the earth where we are. And if that doesn't happen, I don't know what happens to the integrity of our identity.
Good points. Good points. Thank you, Sister Melinda. Barbara. You're muted here.
Sorry, I'm muted. No, I had the privilege of visiting Sister Melinda at the training center where they were teaching those farming techniques in the Darién back in 1994, I think it was. And I remember that I was impressed by the fact that people who who participated in the courses there learned to farm without destroying the rainforest. They learned to raise their crops on smaller areas of land and to keep the forest intact around them. And it was really, really important. And it's something that's been important in all of the Amazon based and other tropical areas. And I remember talking to a man who had just completed the course. He was there with his family. And I asked him what his neighbors thought about it, because part of the idea of this was to replicate what Sister Sheila was saying, to replicate the experience. The idea was that they would go back to their communities, they would practice these methods, and by example, they would teach their neighbors. So I asked him what his neighbors thought of it. And he said, you know, my neighbors go past my farm plot and they look at it and they say, that's where those crazy people live. But those crazy people, they produce. So those were the crazy folks who Sister Melinda had been training and converting.
Mhm.
Sheila, a lot of what we're talking about has to do with the principles of Laudato Si, the encyclical that Pope Francis issued in 2015. This year, the Vatican is going to launch a Laudato Si action platform to invite Catholics to take part in what it calls a 7-year journey to total sustainability in the spirit of Laudato Si. This action platform will include activities for families, parishes, schools, universities, hospitals, and healthcare centers, businesses, and farms, and religious orders, sort of all of the possible Catholic institutions from the family on up.
Mhm.
And the activities will focus on the 7 Laudato Si goals, which are a response to the cry of the earth, a response to the cry of the poor, ecological economics, the adoption of a simple lifestyle, ecological spirituality, community engagement, and participatory action. The launch was initially planned for May, but will now be done in 2 parts, what the Vatican's calling a soft launch in May, and the main event in September or October, coinciding with the season of creation or the Feast of St. Francis of Assisi. Sister Sheila, you're on the steering committee for the Laudato Si rollout plan. Could you tell us a little more about how Sowing Hope for the Planet connects with this Laudato Si action platform?
The Sowing Hope for the Planet started out as a campaign, although we had a plan in place so that we could begin the education process. And so we were very intent at trying to involve as many people as we could, particularly the sisters and all of their connections. And what you see here is the website that we have for Sowing Hope for the Planet. We are really pushing the anniversary year, this whole year, which is to be dedicated to launching and to really trying to do something with the Laudato Si, also promoting here the COP 15 on biodiversity. So all of these things are elements coming out of the integral ecology part of the commission. And so our efforts is to show, let's go from the campaigning to really want to involve people and to rev them up and move them forward, to really look at the idea that we are dealing with something that's urgent. The climate is in a state that we need to be able to turn it around. And we need to be partnering with others, and we need to be realistic. And the goals are a way for us to really actualize the Laudato Si, the message. And so what the challenge is that we're all trying to work together. So the sisters are at the table. So we would talk about that. We know we are there, and we're helping really form this pathway forward. There are about 200 on the working groups in the 7 areas. And then we look at the 7 goals that were being discussed. So what's happening is that the different groups are really processing the information in a way that is going to be particular for the different groups that you mentioned, Barbara, so that we don't have to say, well, if it's about parishes, oh, I need to say instead of parishes, I'm saying religious communities. So when we're looking at the sector, which is the religious life, which is the men and the women religious, and how we are advanced at our connections, is we're looking at what kind of public commitment can we make. And we say we are doing many things, but we're not public about it. We're not witnessing about it. So we're being asked to really bring forward what it is that we're doing and sharing a way that really invite others, to engage others into many of the same things that we are doing. Then we really look at how can we actualize, and I just shared some of the examples here, how can we actualize these goals and integrate them in our lives in a way that it has that connection. As Melinda was saying, this has to be something of integrity. It has to be a personal conversion, and it needs to be that which is a communal. So we need to be working together and to make a difference in that way. And then we need to be rolling it out in the different communities. You know, we need to be engaging communities. For example, in one of the religious groups, they involved the community in collecting all plastics. They were really going to renovate the whole community. And they had a billboard really announcing it. And then afterwards, they put a billboard, they changed the screen, and they had some of the examples of the work that they were doing. So it was a celebratory experience. So it's about being creative, about making a difference. Now, the serious part about it is that we want to be strategic. And we're looking at tipping points, and 3.5% of the population in Germany is what it took to take down the Berlin Wall. But if we want to make a systemic change, and this is what we're after, it's 21 to 25%. So this is why Pope Francis is asking us to work together, to network together, to see that we're all members of a team, no matter what it is that we're doing, it all matters. And as he has in terms of his own plan, it's not just a one-time event. This is going to be a process, and it's going to be a process in the long haul. And if we really are listening to the scientists, we have less than 10 years to turn things around and to maintain less than 1.5 degrees Celsius increase in temperature. We also have to look at how we can be unified and minimize these conflicts, see how we can work together, and know that realities are more important than ideals. So we have to be able to demonstrate that we're doing it. And the whole is greater than the part, even the sum of the parts. So when we're talking about all of us working together, and you can imagine the challenge that is, we know that that's there, and it has to make a difference. We need the will to move forward. We need to be looking at the science data that tells us we need to be cautious, as opposed to it's going to come up with a solution and we don't have to worry about what's taking place. We need to affirm whatever it is that we're doing, that everyone can feel that they're a part of this taking place. So that's the message that's coming out here with the Laudato Si action platform. The soft launch means that it's going to be the announcement that people, that religious and all these different groups can begin to say, I am serious about sustaining an integral ecology. I have 7 years to do this. I am going to make a statement now that I am carrying it forward. So beginning on the 24th of May, and then going through till October 4th. Now, the reason why we chose October 4th is because that is the end of the season of creation. So at that time, we will announce those who have said, you can count on us to make a commitment for sustainable ecology. So you can see there's a grand plan here. This Pope Francis has got us all moving, and he's very clear. And so we think we can do this. We believe we can do this. And we are meeting with one another, and we're sharing the ideas. So it's about how can we do this together? That's the dynamic. And as one does well, then we all do well. So we have the communications are involved, trying to sort out what is happening in the world and how we can raise that up. So we have the idea that it's not just about motivating others to do things, it's about engaging and finding a way and celebrating what needs to be done. And to pick up at what Melinda is saying, to be able to really partner with one another, to take the information, not just to be amassing it, but to go to the shoes and to make a difference and choose what we can do. That's what the plan is about. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Sister Melinda, in terms of that raising awareness and making sure that we know we're all connected, you've been running these Web of Life retreats, which we mentioned briefly. Tell us just a little bit about them, and what will you be doing them again? And what was the experience of it? What came out of it?
Well, I think, the inspiration to do this was to offer the beauty, the reality, the challenges of the rainforest, which most of our families and friends from our places of origin were not familiar. They haven't had the experience of rainforest. And we thought that this would, in order to discover a new way of relating to Earth, of relating to all of life and to one another, it's wonderful to be in a situation that is so strange. And for most of the participants, the rainforest is a situation that is very, very strange, unknown, and fearful. A lot of people are afraid of the rain, or they have some kind of anxiety about the forest, about the reptiles and the insects and all the wonderful diversity of life that is here. And so the idea was that in this type of a workshop, the Web of Life, it's a wonderful place to experience the Web of Life because there's so much variety and diversity. So it was that the forest and also Panama itself would be a wonderful place to do this, because Panama, well, it has several descriptions of itself, besides having the bridge of the Americas, and itself being an isthmus between the north and south. There's a wonderful book called Panama Biological Bridge, because what happens in Panama is the life that's in South America and of North America meets in Panama, because it really is a bridge of life forms of a great intensity of exchange and a very dynamic place of life. And and it was one of the last places to emerge from the water, from the seas, and it ended up joining the two continents. And so as we became very excited about the possibility of being able to share with others this experience, and also almost kind of like a shock experience too, in a certain way, because it's so different. Some of the other ideas in the Web of Life was precisely to, we had many scientists, Panamanian scientists. The Smithsonian Institute has a big center here, and several in Panama. And the idea was to bring together the knowledge and discoveries and wonder of science that is being discovered in the forests and in the oceans, and to bring those experts to come and share with us, as we, from most of us not being scientists, but and how science has to become so much a part of our life today. It has to become so much a part of our faith today. So for people of faith who, we really want to live our faith in a dynamic, creative way, we must listen, we must hear, we must be in tune with science, especially in terms of the earth, the universes, the planets. And so we had botanists, we had an expert on jaguars, we had an expert on beetles, we had an expert on that. Anyway, but these folks, and they are all so fascinating because they're totally dedicated to beetles. You know, now if that doesn't set you thinking, how somebody could have a doctorate in beetles, you know, that's wonderful. And then they awakened in us the wonder. The woman who's the head of the Audubon Society in Panama came and shared. And one day she was down on her knees investigating mushrooms. And anyway, it was just, you meet so many wonderful people from the scientific world. And that is such a challenge that we need in order to inform our living faith today. So in the Web of Life, we attempt to combine where we are, an experience of part of the planet that most of us are not familiar with, to see it, to feel it, and we have a special little bug here that is just so annoying, you know, and it's called a cocodilla. And they burrow into your skin and they make life very, very uncomfortable, but you can't see them, or at least people like my age can't see them. And so it's like, you know, we have a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn about living with coloradillas in our whole life. And so, and the other wonderful thing about this experience for me is the type of people who came to participate. You know, whatever that farmer said, you know, the crazies. Well, it's you have to have a little bit of that. It's a sense of wonder. It's a sense of adventure, but it goes a little bit beyond that. And I think that in the web of life was what we attempted to create. And then what does that mean in terms of living our faith today? In terms of our saying, yes, we want to live our style, we want it to be as with the spirit of Jesus, with an openness to God is present, whether we don't control that, but God is present, you know. And so it's another way of awakening ourselves to that. And I just want to say one other little thing for those of us from the West and who our spiritualities seem to greatly come from the desert. And this is the farthest thing from the desert that you'll ever experience. So I went off one year to a desert to try to experience a desert, which I haven't. And it's very different. And so a spirituality that comes from a desert and a spirituality that comes from a rainforest is very, very different. And we have to establish all different kinds of dialogues and sense of wonder. So, and the other question would, I'd love to be able to continue sharing this experience with anybody who would like to come and would be most welcome. It's a question of organizing. It's a question of a lot of things about logistics and contacting people, but that's possible if people are interested and they really want to come for this kind of an experience.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. And I know you're so gracious with Tracy Barnett, who was a freelancer who did the wonderful series for us. Goodness sakes, if you can't go in person, I invite you to at least go on the GSR experience of it. It was like being there, but it sounds lovely. It sounds inviting, bugs and all. Sister Sheila, I'm going to turn to you about the Amazon, because we're talking about this. And I know you hosted the JPIC representatives in Rome during the Synod. What were some of the key messages from Indigenous people in the Amazon region? And what do you think resonates for those Indigenous people outside the Amazon?
Well, along with the Synod on the Amazon, we had the Casa Común, which had about 250 sessions, so that we could really integrate the message about what was happening in the Synod with what is happening in our daily life. And about 50 of the Indigenous persons came and just spread their lives everywhere. I mean, they were a wonderful presence. They were a gentle presence. They were a welcoming presence. They embraced you with their charism. It was just a beautiful experience. And then to listen to them share their stories, of course it was, they had some interpretation, but also they spoke Spanish. So they were able to communicate in a way that really was engaging. And to share their stories. And I remember one of the young men talking about the pollution of the river, and how he would be, why he would be so upset is because he didn't want his brother fish to be mad at him. And I think this is what you're saying, Melinda, that this is a reality for their lives. The relationship with nature and with one another is tangible. You know that it matters to them, and they carry that forward. But it's not just nature, it's everyone, and we were engaged in a time for the Stations of the Cross, and we're celebrating all of the martyrs, and so many of them who were there with us had family members who had suffered, who had lost their lives. They lost also their livelihood because of what was happening in terms of the taking over with the mining, single crops. Many things were impacting their lives, and they would share that as a way of trying to bring you into their lives so that you would have an understanding of where they were. And then I remember there was a panel presentation. It was actually hosted by the Jesuits, and they had some of the Indigenous people from South America and then also from the United States. And they shared your stories, and I couldn't help but feel actually more pain and sorrow for our own Native Americans, because they had the land, but they didn't have the culture. And the South Americans had the culture, and they were fighting for the land. And when Pope Francis talks about the social needs and includes the culture, you get it. You receive such a deep understanding, and they're fighting in South America with the education coming in, that the schools don't try to denigrate the heritage, the legacies that are being passed on in the indigenous culture. And the fact that their marketplace is the forest. I mean, Melinda, when you're talking about the forest, I'm thinking they would be excited about this. And the pharmacy is the forest. So this idea of well-being means I need to be in a sense of peace and harmony with the way that I live and the way that I relate to those who are part of my group, my indigenous group. So yes, we have things to share. You'll see that they could have their cell phones, they could, their computers, but there's other things that we need to be learning from them in terms of the quality of life, a simplicity of life, the emphasis on relationship, only using what they see as necessary. And as they're sharing their stories, for example, when they are dealing with mining or a corporation coming in and telling them, oh, they're going to have such a great life after the mining and all of this. And then they come to find out they have to really defend their rights. They never thought they had to do this. So they're brought to the table for a conversation, and who's making the context? So they're having, this is a difficult situation, so they're sharing that. But the poverty is also there, and the artisanal mining is also there. So they're struggling even within themselves to how can they make a living without, really destroying the environment and also endangering their own lives. So conversations, people to people, person to person, valuing really the basic things of life, the family, and having a sense of well-being, and having a job, having a roof over my head, making a contribution and being in control of the environment that I hope to have. Those were the messages we shared.
That's great. Thank you so much. Barbara.
Thank you, Sister Sheila. And we only have a few minutes left, but I'd like to ask each of you both of you the same question. I'd like to ask each of you, if we could each do one thing, take one personal step, each of us, to address climate change, to address environmental degradation, to care for creation, what should we consider doing? What's the one thing that you would suggest that each of us do? Sister Sheila, let's start with you.
Well, I think, we talked about the plastics, that's for sure. And, the transportation, our own diets, I think it may be consumerism, you could say that. Be really conscious of how we have valued our life by what we are purchasing. So I think that's a care for one another. Look around, go around your community and see what's there, but do it in a way that's alive and attentive. So I would say, just to be alert to what God is asking you to do at the moment, and respond to that.
Great, thanks. Sister Melinda, what would you say?
I think for me, one of the most important elements that will permit us to change, will free us to change the basis of our relationship with all of life. And for me, the key is there in how we relate with all that is life, everything that we don't understand, the things we don't like, the things we appreciate. And we grow into a relationship where we do not see them as belonging to us. Even my ideas don't belong to me. Even the beauty that I can appreciate does not belong to me. And I firmly believe, and this is what I share as much as I can, is that we, at all levels of life, we have to learn to be in touch with the innermost who I am and the innermost who the other is. And in that, maybe that's another way of saying contemplation or whatever, meditation, but it's, we need, and I need to be in more frequent touch with the deep silence that is within me, is within all of creation, and is within the other, because that's where the new web of life is going to be formed on a completely different basis from the social, economic, political identities that we move through. And that and the other thing, I really truly believe that God is present, the Spirit is here, but it doesn't, the God does not depend on us to be here. God is, as they say in the, in Central America, presente. And the God of life is present. Now, whether we're aware of that or not, and we have to awaken our own awareness, we have to grow in our consciousness of the presence of whatever name, goodness, beauty, God, the Spirit is present, is. And so we have to leave space for that. We have the illusion of control, and how can we lose that illusion of control and be free? And be free. So however we can share that with others, for me, that's the most, for all the programs that we have and that we do and dedicate to projects and everything, underneath all of that, something else has to happen. And for me, that's one of our major, our wonderful responsibilities that we have if we call ourselves religious women. It is to be keenly aware and sensitive with our tremendous capacity and creativity to be able to share at this other level. And it traditionally may have many names like prophetic or spiritual, or, but without dichotomizing, I think it really is possible. And it's possible to offer people a space of silence where they become, or they come in contact with that. And for me, that's at the heart of what it is to be religious, to be woman, to be alive today.
Thanks. Yeah, and those little messages come in unexpected ways at unexpected moments. I remember when I was visiting you, Sister Melinda, there was a full moon one night, and I remember going outside in the full moon, and it was very bright, and full moon lights everything up, and there was a little drop of water on a leaf, and I looked at this drop of water, and there was the reflection of the entire moon in a tiny drop of water on this leaf. And I've never forgotten that. And it really brought home to me the importance of place, the importance of rootedness, our place in between the earth and the moon, our place in the world, in that forest that you were talking about, and the importance of relationship with one another, and relationship with other than human beings. So I thank you for that reflection. Thanks, Sister Sheila, also for your reflections about our place in creation. Sister Melinda, could you lead us in a closing prayer to wrap up the conversation that we've had?
Okay.
I'd be very happy to. So let's begin with all of us from all over the world, many of us with different times of the day, of the night. Let's just be silent together for a few moments. Let's be present, not only to one another, but to where we are, to where each one of us is, to the wonders of being alive today. O gracious, beautiful, and loving Spirit, God with us, thank you. Thank you for increasing our awareness of your creativity, of your love, of your challenges, of your mystery. With grateful hearts, we trust With grateful hearts, we welcome tomorrow. With grateful hearts, we will be blessing for all of your creation. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Beautiful closing prayer. Thank you. I wanted to thank our two guests and my colleague, Barbara. Reminders that we will be sending out an email with the resources that were noted here. It was just a wonderful conversation and discussion. Thank you all so much. Thank you for all the participants who came. Thank you also to the NCR GSR staff who are behind the scenes and make all these sessions possible. And we're going to put in one small plug for a wonderful program that National Catholic Reporter has called NCR Forward. And it is with those, this type of, if you go on that website, you'll find out more about it. It allows us to put on programs like this and to keep up the good work that NCR, that Earthbeat, and that Global Sisters Report does. So thank you for that. And I wanted to let you all know that we'll be having our next Witness and Grace program on May 18th, where we will host a conversation with and about nuns and nuns. So look for more information on that. You'll be getting it in the mail, in your emails shortly if you're a GSR subscriber, and we invite you to register for that and to join us for that conversation on May 18th. You know, Sister Melinda, I was thinking, and Sister Sheila, both of you, again, one of the things that's so important about this conversation is to remember that rootedness, because it is that through that. And Barbara, thank you for your wonderful reflection about seeing the moon reflected in that small drop of water, because those action steps that we have to take, those personal steps we take are so important. But when we act from that space, then those steps become clear. You know, it becomes clear. I have to confess that I did not tear that piece of paper toweling today. I did not. I used cloth. You know, again, I'm thinking of this session, and I'm trying to reduce my paper use. That's one of my vows is to get rid of any paper in my kitchen and just use. So anyway, on that small note, thank you again, all of you, for coming, for joining us, and we'll see you again, and look forward to the discussion in May. Thanks. Happy Earth Day, all. Let's do what we can to save the planet. Bye.